In this episode of Art Loft, ICA Miami exhibition story, John Miller. Abstract artist Michael Hudak.
I am attracted to surfaces that have been affected by the elements, by time, and they develop their own history. They do have a history, and it just happens.
And Caitlin Warner's art dispensing vending machines.
I buy old secondhand vending machines and I sort of clean them up. I make sure they work. I put new branding on it, so they are now art vending machines instead of condom vending machines or snack vending machines or tampon vending machines or whatever they were in their former life.
It's all ahead on this episode of Art Loft.
Funding for Art Loft was made possible by Friends of Art and
in the Florida Keys and Key West, every night is a spectacular show. And every day is another masterpiece.
Hi, I'm Lolo Reskin, and from the studios here at South Florida PBS, this is Art Loft. Welcome back. I'm Lolo Reskin. On this episode of Art Loft, we're examining innovative approaches in the visual arts. First up, a new film from the Institute of Contemporary Art Miami on the first U.S. museum exhibition of conceptual artist John Miller. The show exhibited 3 decades of painting, sculpture, drawing, photography, installation, and video. For the ICA Miami, Miller worked on site restoring elaborate sculptures and designing his most ambitious installation yet, a giant labyrinth where visitors make their way into his exhibition, I Stand, I Fall.
Okay, well, I'll try. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that's maybe too loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. Back when I was in art school, I wrote a lot of songs, like in the kind of punk band era. And then I started playing with bands again. Like, we reached a point where most of our socializing was dinner parties. And like, I like good food and I like going to dinner parties, but I didn't want to just do that. So this was another kind of way to have a social experience. But it feels more like play and less like work in some ways. Because he doesn't think that the unconscious is necessarily a benign or good thing. So the unconscious isn't valorized. I was approached by After All Books. I was close friends with Mike Kelly. It's funny because when he was doing that work, I kind of took it for granted. People who knew him less well may have studied the work in a way that I didn't, but as time went on, it became more and more apparent to me that it was one of his most important pieces. So I wanted to go back and consider it and analyze what it meant. Since he and I were in the same circles, it was very easy for me to contact all of his assistants, to contact curators who worked with him. This is the most extensive piece of writing I've done on anything. I think in many ways our work is very different, but a lot of critics would lump us together. You know, certainly we were friends, but you know, Mike collaborated with a lot of people. We never collaborated for whatever reason. I think that we share a lot of values in common, but I think that there's a difference in approach. I think a lot of people think of public space as free space. I think that there's certain kinds of behaviors that are permissible, others that aren't, but there's certainly a wider range of behaviors than what you would see versus someone crying on reality television. And all these things condition and qualify what it means to share space with other people. I'm not looking for special theatricalized types. I'm looking for someone who could conceivably be me. I start by just photographing people on street corners, and I always edit out images where people are glaring angrily at the camera. You know, part of this involves a kind of fiction of the photographer, me not being there. I think of these as being social portraits, and that I'm concerned with a kind of group dynamic. And what I'm trying to get at is a kind of contemporary condition with everyday kind of rhetoric. These people may look so normal as to seem invisible in a certain way, but maybe in 10 or 15 years they'll have like a much different kind of reading in terms of style, in terms of period, in terms of public discourse. Everyone who helps me paint these often speculates about who the people are. For example, I feel that even though I shot this woman in Berlin, I feel almost 100% sure that she's American. You know, but I have no way of proving that. So this is how the show's laid out. The pedestrian figures will all be in one room, and before we started painting them, and I think even before I had the panels cut, I had decided we should do new pieces for the show. So all the pedestrian figures will be new. This is a mirror maze designed for the atrium space in the ICA, a labyrinth that will be large enough that you could conceivably get lost in it, or at least take some wrong turns. We have to go into production soon, so it was a pretty tight turnaround. But I think it turned out okay. I've done 2 such mazes before. One was in Lausanne, Switzerland. The other was in Moji, Japan. But this will be the biggest. The work upstairs, as an artist, I tend to jump around a lot, and I have different phases of my work. So figures function differently at different points in the work. Maybe one way to describe it would be that there's different deployments of the figure throughout the show. It's not like an absolute opposition between the maze and the rest of the show, but there can be different sections of the show that resonate in different ways with other sections. I think Alex was very cognizant, particularly with the earlier work, of a particular American orientation. Compared to like the shows I did in Europe, he wanted to key it to a kind of Americana that was embedded in the work, which I think was stronger in the earlier work, and now culture's globalizing too, so it's a whole different thing. Okay, yeah,
Great.
let's do it.
Thank you.
It certainly looks better than what it does.
Okay.
You know that.
Yeah.
So.
That's the goal.
As the week went on, stuff started looking really good again, like brand new. There was even one lender who joked to Alex that she was lending the piece because she knew it would come back clean. Sometimes collectors feel the opposite way, that their piece will be on display and it'll come back damaged. You know, by the time the show opened, everything looked as good as new. The figurative part of the work provides a point of access. And maybe Alex had that in mind too, like in terms of speaking to a public, that on the one hand, I think you can go in fairly deep and start parsing meanings in the work. You can, but it's not the kind of work that you'll come up to and say, oh, this is alien, or I don't get it, or something like that. Like, there's a kind of an immediate point of identification to most of the pieces I do.
Coming up on Art Loft.
It is really important to make things by hand, really start to finish. I think, meticulously crafting things and really creating the experience and what you hand off to someone is important to me as an artist.
Albuquerque artist Michael Hudak finds inspiration in the surfaces that surround him. He translates the colors and textures of these surfaces to his works on canvas. Here's a look from New Mexico PBS.
Michael, why are you so engaged with abstraction?
I often don't think of my work as abstraction. What engages me is surface and texture, color, how I can use the things around me, the things that I see every day, the things that I photograph, how I can use those as a motivation or a reference for the surfaces that I create. In a way, they're kind of realistic because I'm creating urban surfaces with paint, using the things that I see and the things that I photograph as a reference. For example, if I'm photographing a metal surface, say the side of a dumpster, you don't need to know that it's the side of a dumpster. I will eliminate in cropping the edges of the dumpster so that all you see is a surface, texture, colors, shapes, and things that have happened to that surface.
So how would you say the work gets us to see differently?
I think if you're really looking at the work and you're looking at the sources of the work, or if you are aware of the sources, you begin or can begin to see things around you that perhaps you might have overlooked before. As I am attracted to surfaces that have been affected by the elements, by time, and they develop their own history. They do have a history. And it just happens.
Yeah.
And I think that is the beauty in those surfaces, is that they just happen. The person that comes along to paint over the graffiti on the side of a dumpster is not thinking about how his marks are going to look, or the quality, or how thick or thin his lines are. He just needs to cover over the graffiti, or the rust needs to be sealed. And when that happens over time, over years, for me, this incredibly beautiful surface is created. So one of the tricks for me then is when I'm in the studio trying to emulate that, I feel like I need to make a surface that looks like it just happened. Almost as if it were inevitable, that it couldn't be any other way.
So would this connect to this idea of your personal kind of intuitive response to the medium?
It is absolutely intuitive.
How so?
Because I'm standing in front of this canvas, or a piece of paper, or leaning over it, or whatever I'm doing, and I need to respond to what's there. Then I make my choices about how I'm going to respond. Sometimes I overthink that, but sometimes I just go at it. I'll cover the surface with paint, I'll go at it with the trowel, I'll put it on, I'll take it off, put something else over top of it. I had 3 or 4 or 5 surfaces, paper surfaces, that I had not worked on in a while. And I knew on my table in the studio there were some paints that I had mixed up weeks ago that were going to be drying out soon. And I thought, I just want to go down and I want to put those paints on top of the paper. I don't care how they look, because I want to end up with some white painting. So whatever I do with those paints is going to be covered up anyhow. So I don't care what happens. The colors had nothing to do with one another, and I just went at it with my trowel, moving that paint across the surface, and it turns out I loved what was happening. I loved the way the paint was mixing, what the paint was doing on the surface. I loved the thickness that was being built up. And it began to create surface and texture as it began to lift up. And I think that was a case for me where I was not thinking about what I was doing, where I was trying to turn the thinking off, just get the paint on the surface, just cover it, because I don't care how it looks. And in the process of not caring about how it looks, I ended up creating something that I did in fact care about. When you begin a painting, anything is possible. All the possibilities are there. But as you continue to work on it, I think your choices and the possibilities become narrower until you get very, very near the end, where there's maybe only 1 or 2 things that you can do that are really right. And sometimes all I can do is stop. And I may put it away, maybe for a few days, maybe for a few weeks, maybe a year before I pull it out again. And then I have to, at that point I see it with new eyes. I may not like it at all. I'm not attached to it anymore either. So if I need to do something to it that completely alters what I had done before, it's okay.
How do you know it's done?
I need to resonate with the work in some way. And I can't define that. It's a response to the surface. It's a response that I have to the painting. And there are moments when I'll be doing something to the surface and I just stop, and it's like the light bulb. It's yes. There is nothing else that I can do to this work. There's nothing else I can do to this surface to make it any better.
What's important about that moment and that feeling?
I hadn't thought about that before, but I think that's one of the moments that I live for, is to be able to experience that moment where everything that you've done and everything that you've been working on comes together. in that one piece.
Next week on Art Loft.
The evidence of her evolution effortlessly weaves through Satin's studio space. Paper crafting lays the foundation for binding. Found objects become jewelry, then replaces paper. Metal invades ceramics, then becomes pages. There are no boundaries, only growth born of a self-imposed randomness and experimentation.
Printmaker and book artist Caitlin Warner has created a unique way to get her work into the hands of the public. She converts vintage vending machines into unvending machines, which dispense dozens of her meticulously handcrafted books. Twin Cities PBS in St. Paul brings us this profile.
My training is in books. I love making books. It is really important to make things by hand, really start to finish. I think, meticulously crafting things and really creating the experience and what you hand off to someone is important to me as an artist. I feel like I want to be very involved in every step, or as much as I can be, because I feel like when you work on something, you're putting yourself into it and you're putting feeling into it time and energy and emotion. And it's nice. It's a way for me to sort of give little gifts and bundles of hopefully kind of like happiness, pleasant little surprises to the world. With my work, I often find myself working as though I'm a one-person assembly line. I really don't earn much money at it. It takes a lot of time and work. It's time intensive, it's exhausting, but I really do like the idea of spreading art quietly and insidiously just all over the place. That's the motivation for me to keep doing it. I just like putting it out there, but quietly, so that when people come upon it, it's more delightful. I began the Unvending project in 2012. It coincided with a residency I had at the High Point Center for Printmaking. I buy old secondhand vending machines and I sort of clean them up. I make sure they work. I put new branding on it, so they are now art vending machines instead of condom vending machines or snack vending machines or tampon vending machines or whatever they were in their former life. And then I make art to dispense out of them. And the art is often thematically related to the machine itself. This is one of my unvending machines. I call it the smut machine because it's a former condom vending machine like you would find in, say, a kind of a chintzy gas station or a bar maybe. And all the art that comes out of the smut machines has to do with love or romance or human sexuality or just anything. It's an opportunity to speak frankly, speak openly, be kind of silly and fun. And currently, it's dispensing two different little books that are a facsimile of a series of text messages, a one-sided conversation from a person in love who isn't really responding to their advances, and they get slowly crazier and crazier and a little more obsessive and desperate. Like most of my work, something that you can decide whether or not you take it seriously. It's either pretty funny, a little joke, a little one-liner, or it's kind of serious and deep. The Modest Manual for Living does seem to be just kind of a perennial favorite. It's one that is, on the one hand, sort of a little clever one-liner because on the inside, all of the pages just say inhale and exhale, which is all you really have to do to live. The term vending has some very commercial implications, and it comes with this idea of, profit and loss and margins and making sure you earn more money than you spend. And honestly, with this project, I am not earning more money than I spend. So it's really an uncapitalistic, unvending project. It is an art for art's sake sort of thing.
Thanks for joining us on Art Loft. You can always connect with us on social media at ArtLoftSFL. And watch us anytime on the PBS app by selecting WPBT2 as your local station. For Art Loft, I'm Lola Reskin. See you next time.
Funding for Art Loft was made possible by Friends of Art and
In the Florida Keys and Key West, every night is a spectacular show. And every day is another masterpiece.